Mayor, I've started the stream. I'll verify that it's running, but we should be ready to go.
Okay. I saw the notification on my phone streaming, so we must be ready. Huh?
I've got a caller that I think I'm going to end up having to mute.
Hey Nathan, this is Mason. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I'll be on video shortly. I'm in the car on my phone. I'll mute my phone again.
Okay.
Hey Nathan.
Yes.
This is Jerry. I just wanted to remind you that I'm going to step out of the meeting at 7 so I can go pray with the fire department, and then I'll come back right away.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I lost the screen here. There we go. So Dwayne, are we ready? I couldn't quite make out what you were saying before. Sorry, I lost the screen here.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. All right. Then, Al, could we start with roll call, please?
Okay, we'll do roll call for our budget workshop, the June 15th at 5:30. Benson.
Benson here.
Benson is present. Sarda.
Sarda here.
Sarda's present. Ferdig. And I don't believe he's going to be here, but I'll do it one more time. Ferdig. Okay, Hoffner.
Hoffner present.
Hoffner's present. Minor.
Miner's present.
Minor's present. Moser.
Mosier here.
Moser's present. Schramm.
Schramm here.
Schramm is present. Weber.
Weber's present.
Weber's present. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson present.
Mayor Johnson's present. City Manager Leon.
Leon present.
City Manager Leon is present. City Attorney Denherter.
Denherter is here.
City Attorney Denherter is present. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Al. Next, we have public appearances. This is a time when people in our viewing audience can address the City Commission about any items not listed on tonight's agenda. Dwayne, is there anyone in the meeting room who would like to address us?
We have no participants at the meeting room.
And do we have Dave watching the YouTube comments and watching email?
We have no comments via YouTube Live.
Are you just doing comments and emails tonight, Dave? Is that
Correct.
okay? All right. Moving on then, I will turn it over to the city manager to introduce the proposed capital improvement budget.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. If you need to interrupt me, please do so if you have questions or anything you'd like to add. I'm manning a couple screens here. Dwayne is going to let me drive, which is scary, but hopefully you can see what I'm seeing. You can also walk through your hard copy if you have one or on your computer screen. We're going to go through the capital improvement plan as it's drafted. So the department heads are also on the call. So if you have some specific technical questions, we will talk with them as well. If you're not talking, as Dwayne mentioned, or you're on the phone and not talking, please mute your mic. There is a little bit of feedback. So with that, I'll get started here and talk a little bit about the CIP for 2021 that we put together primarily, although we do take a look at 5 years in our plan. This year's CIP is different in that I've taken the approach that it's kind of like one of those choose your own adventure novels. When I was in elementary school, I used to check out these books from the library called Choose Your Own Adventure. And you'd read a little bit, and then you'd think about what you would like to see or have happen, and you got to choose. You got to a certain point. So you got to choose, does the princess slay the dragon and get her prince, or does she go on and conquer more lands? So you got to choose. But you had to make the decisions without all the information, and you didn't really know where you were going to end up or what story you were going to have read when you start. So usually by June, we are into the first few chapters of our Choose Your Own Adventure novel. But this year, with everything that's happened in our world and in our community, we are just sort of looking around the library shelves. We're maybe cracking a few spines of books and looking at them and deciding which book we might even want to check out. So to say that we need more information before we can finalize this is certainly true. At this point, I don't have enough information to give you, and you don't have enough information to really choose which direction you want to go. But we have to move forward because we have only a couple months before we need to submit a budget, before I need to submit a budget for you. So I really want you to take away that this is going to change. It's going to change again before you see it again, and it's going to change when it's presented to the public, and it's going to change after it's adopted, because we just don't have all the information we need. Some things for you to think about in terms of this year's capital improvement plan are FEMA funding. So we have received some small amounts of FEMA funds already for some of the smaller damage that we incurred on March 19th of 2019, but we're still in the very beginning phases of the Marne Creek project. So we still have a lot of funding hopefully coming our way and a lot of projects coming our way. So that's still something we need to keep in the back of our minds. Our recent EDA funding and award, we'll talk about that when we get to wastewater, but that's going to have an implication on our rates at the wastewater plant. So we know we need to have some match for that award, and in order to make that match, we're going to have to impact rates. So it's something to keep in mind there. CARES Act, federal funding and state funding. We don't know yet. We don't know if we're going to have a Merry Christmas or if we're not going to have a Merry Christmas. So we just don't know what all is applicable yet to apply for funding. We don't know if we have the right things in place to acquire funding yet. We don't know what the programs are. So we're hoping to find that out. I hope to find out a little more this morning, or early this afternoon, so that I could share with you. And I didn't get that information. So that's something we don't know about. We also don't know what the water plant will cost us to heat, operate, use chemicals. Certainly those bleed into the operating expenses that we have, but this will be our first full year of operating the plant. So we're going to have to take that into account, especially when it comes to our rate discussion. We're building an aquatic center, if you didn't notice by our screen there, or if you haven't noticed in our community. Next year will be our first year of running that and operating that facility. We don't know what all is going to be the cost in construction, and then we won't know exactly the cost for operations. So that's something we have to consider. Excuse me. Police mandates. So we're hearing a lot of talk now at the federal and even state level about reforming law enforcement and the way law enforcement is conducted. Is that going to impact us? I don't know that yet. You don't know that yet. And will any mandates be funded? We just don't know. So we need to think about that and keep that in the back of our mind. And then I added to my list the unknowns of 2021, because in 2019 and 2020, the only normal circumstances we had was that there were no normal circumstances. So it was important for me to make sure that we stay agile and aware that something's probably going to happen that we can't anticipate. And that we're just not going to know about. So as we go into this adventure, not completely understanding our revenue picture and maybe not completely even understanding our expenditure picture, we're going to have to be flexible. But I know this commission is understanding and has a good grasp on our budget and is willing to be that. So my advice to you then, and what you'll see reflected in all of my budgeting this year, is even more conservative in our approach throughout the CIP, throughout outside agencies, and really aggressive when it comes to requesting funding and looking for funding resources. So Greg Henderson, if you're out there, we're gonna, be knocking at your door a lot. District 3, we know our planning districts are gonna help with the state funding, so we're gonna be working with those folks a lot. And if there's federal money to be had, we have a lot of good grant writers and strong folks who are right here in City Hall who have great success accessing grants. But know that as they're doing that, maybe some of the other regular duties won't take precedent, because we do want to be very aggressive when it comes to requesting funding. So just to set a few goals and expectations for this evening, remember the color coding when we get into the capital improvement plan. The green indicates a change, a decrease in funding, and the yellow indicates an increase. Our capital improvement plan is primarily equipment and large projects. So we're not talking about the water bill and the electricity and the personnel, although, like I said, we may bleed and cross into some of those discussions. We're primarily just talking about the stuff. That's how I look at the CIP. Most of the budget focuses on 2021. This is a 5-year plan, so you can look out and see some of the other things that are forthcoming, but they're not beyond 2021. They're not necessarily in any in the correct year or in the year that they'll be accomplished. I would like to know from you tonight if there is a project or piece of equipment that we do not have listed in our capital improvement plan that you all see as being important to be this year to have being done. Maybe there's a street project. We talked about Whiting Drive sometime as a street project that the city commission decided during a CIP, we absolutely want this street done. So we went back, staff went back and shuffled around the CIP. That's the kind of thing I'd like to hear from you tonight. We'll give you our recommendations and then you can decide if we're on the right track. I also want to visit with you a little bit about utility rates and what our needs might be. Talk about those variables that I just mentioned that could impact us, letting us know throughout the year that and then I'd like to touch on the BBB and outside agencies. I don't expect us to have answers tonight about the BBB or answers about outside agencies, but I want to plant some seeds and let you all know what I've been thinking in terms of those two elements of our budget. They're not the biggest part of our budget, but they always render the biggest part of our conversation. So I want to talk about those this evening as well. I want to talk about anything you guys want to talk about also. And I also want to give us a little space to park a few things. So, sometimes in our budget discussions, we talk about big things like new libraries or new aquatics facilities. This is not really the year to talk about those things in the CIP. If you want to talk about those things, I'd like you to bring those up. We'll put them in a parking lot and I'll assign them to a work session. We can talk about them in a work session. Unless I'm very surprised by what funding is utilized for, that comes down through the CARES Act, we won't be embarking on probably one of those quality of life type major projects this year. There's just too many unknowns. So I never want to push you away from dreaming and thinking big. So if you want to do that, mention those things to me and we'll make sure we get them talked about during a work session. So any questions before we start on page 3 with the city manager and finance and information services. If not, I'm just going to start rolling. In these 3 budgets, there isn't a lot to talk about. I will probably be spending a little bit of money in my budget this year to get Corey, our new HR director, up and running in his office, maybe do a little bit of physical redesign. That's reflected in the budget. You'll see both in finance and in IT, we have some upgrades to the AS400, as well as a replacement in an out year in the AS400. That's the system that runs all of our financials, and we definitely want to get that upgrade done. This is the last year they'll do upgrades on site, and then we're going to need to look for a replacement. So that'll be a big expense coming forward in those departments. Anything you want to talk about there? We also have community development on page 3. Not a lot of capital in community development this year. You see in an out year the update of the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan is something we certainly don't want to get too far down the line without looking at updating. We've had it in the capital improvement plan for a couple of years. Dave and I both believe that our comprehensive plan is still serving us, but it's getting to be the point where we should start to consider taking a look at the update. Let's move on to police, if there's no questions there under community development. We are waiting to see what happens with the CARES Act in the police department. So certainly the police department is one that could be very positively impacted from CARES Act funding, being their frontline responders. We did realize today that we have about a $6,000 addition that needs to be made for some more equipment that Chief did visit with Dwayne and I about, and we just didn't get it put in. So the bottom line there on the police department will change a bit. The chief also wants to focus the scenario-based training. You'll see that that amount has gone up a bit, and that's reflective of some of the things that have happened here in recent months. Some of the scenario-based training can reflect some training in those areas. Again, this department could also be negatively impacted by any police reform mandates that we're required to adhere to. We don't know about any of those things yet, although the chief will be involved in a conversation at the state level as early as tomorrow about what's going on in South Dakota and policing, and those things might not even occur, if they occur, until later next year or even the following. So any discussion on police or anything you see there?
Amy, can you remind me, do all of our officers now have body cameras, or are we still purchasing some for them?
I believe they all have them at this point. However, we do have an additional officer with the school resource officer coming on, and we do need to provide the camera there. I believe what you see there is the cost of the camera, and then we do, they're only a couple years old, but we want to make sure we're able to upgrade or replace if we need to as well. Chief, does that sound right to you?
Yes, so that's correct, Manager. One of the things, if you remember, we got those on a state grant, and every officer in the department currently has one, including myself. While we're waiting to purchase the one for the new SRO, once we get him on board, he could actually use mine since I don't get into the field that frequently. But we do all have them, and they're also connected with the cameras in the patrol cars. So they're actually working together. So we constantly have that on tape.
Thanks, Chief.
This is Commissioner Mosier. Is there any technology needs? I know when we talked about the CIP before, possible costs or needs for storage of all the video that's taken? Are we good there, or do we anticipate that might be an addition at some point?
I'll let Dwayne take that. That's above my ability to talk about.
Yeah, well, we will be replacing the police server this year, and we'll be accounting for some of the additional storage that we'll need for the videos. We've had enough operational history under our belt now that I think we have a pretty good handle on what we'll require for storage, and I think our total estimated cost on the server replacement will be about 12 grand, and that's in this year's budget. As far as other technology needs, as Amy's kind of alluded to with the CARES Act funding, some of the service delivery for the police department has obviously been impacted quite a bit, both working from remote workplace, being able to do more out in the field. We've kind of developed a short list of kind of things that we would look at if there's some funding opportunities that might become available to help increase some efficiencies in the department.
Commissioner Minor here. I have two questions for you. One about the radios. Is that upgrade complete? That's my first question. And my second question is about the range upgrade. Is that the shooting range? I know that was damaged in the flood last year, and we were using a temporary space. Have we found a permanent space? If you could inform me, please. Thank you.
So last week we did a punch list inspection on the radio project. We're actively using the new equipment and the new radios. It's just a matter of the contractors finishing up punch list related items, including baseline testing. So I would anticipate that sometime in the next couple of months that project should be closed out, and we'll have a final cost estimate on it. The only remaining component there would be is if we would decide to go ahead and replacing the dispatch furniture. That equipment is original for when we moved over from the old building into the new building. And then with the advent of COVID-19, we might look at trying to create some additional separation between the workspaces to help prevent some of that, or provide for some of that social distancing. Chief Sonnet can talk a little bit about the range, but we did talk about that when we went through the CIP, and we'll be probably moving that into the operating budget, and they are working through a contractual arrangement to utilize the existing private range. So that'll be more of a contract arrangement instead of a capital expenditure. So that'll likely be moving.
I was waiting to see if Chief wanted to say anything about the range, but
I'll kick in real quick. Just one of the things we've done is the Yankton Sharpshooters Association has been in negotiation with us, and we're at this point where I think we can do a contract where we can actually utilize that and save us a considerable amount of money. We did find an alternate location to put a range. However, the cost is very prohibitive. It would be in the $300,000 to $400,000 range by the time we actually put it together. So this will be a whole lot cheaper for the memberships out there at the Sharpshooters. It'll run around $3,000 a year. And I think that it's a very nice facility. It's fairly close to town, and I think it'll be a much better situation for us in the long term. We are still waiting on FEMA funds for some of the equipment that was damaged that we'll actually be able to take out and utilize on the range at the Sharpshooters when it's all said and done. But I'd be happy to answer any other questions on the range that you might have.
Thank you.
There's no other questions. We'll go on to fire. And while we're taking a look at that, I'll remind the public that if you can't see these little numbers on the screen at the RTEC, don't worry. You can get on our website and go under Commission Documents, and this is part of the public packet, so you can bring it up on your screen and view it as well, just so everyone knows that it's available to them. So in fire, we don't have a lot. There is a generator budgeted. That's been outstanding item, generator cabinet, that's been an outstanding item. for a while. Fire is one of those that we might be able to work some of their capital in to the COVID-19 CARES Act. So Tom and I will be discussing, you know, are there ways where something that's already budgeted or needed falls into the CARES Act and COVID-19 funding needs. So there might be a way we can offset some of those expenses, which will be helpful. So we'll be talking about that as well. We have had a number of large expenses in the last couple years in the fire department. Those that are have been on the commission will remember that. Our trucks for now are in good shape. It looks like the next planned truck is probably, excuse me, I moved ahead there, probably 2025, I believe. $2023, it looks like. Excuse me. Nothing to talk about really in civil defense, so I'll move to the next page if there isn't anything else to talk about. Engineering, streets, and snow and ice removal. Nothing really exciting in engineering this year to talk about in terms of capital improvement plans. You know, that's not to say that these departments don't have needs or there isn't things that wouldn't be nice for the departments to have. We've just been really careful not to put anything in that we don't need at all this year because we don't know what our revenue is going to look like. So there are things you can see in the out years that are being requested, but we've asked, you know, unless it's absolutely necessary, let's not get it in the capital improvement plan this year. So you see in streets building upgrades, $15,000. That's for the concrete materials building. That building needs some work. I don't think that's enough in 2020, and I would expect we should, in 2021, I would expect that we should put more in that building. We're going to see if perhaps the purchase of that building would fall under CARES Act, depending upon the timing. It may. And maybe some upgrades could fall under CARES Act. You know, part of that is spacing people appropriately and getting people independent offices and getting people proper restroom facilities and wash stations. That's not why we went into the purchase, but that certainly became an item that made sense and is necessary as we go forward here. So we'll see what happens in that area, but if we're paying for it ourselves, we can just afford a little bit of upgrades and we'll have to do what we can as we can. But maybe we can do a little better and maybe this becomes more of a match situation. In streets, further down there, you see we're replacing the sweeper and replacing the loader. Sweepers, those of you know that have been around a little bit, they don't last very long. They're further up in our replacement schedule than other pieces of equipment, but we've got to have one and we've got to have one that's working well. Also, the loader is one of those backbone pieces of the street shop. It's also, you can see, you know, one of those pieces of equipment that we certainly need to have operating when it comes to all of our construction work. So that's on the docket as well for 2021. You see the active transportation plan funds that are in the budget. We're thinking that there'll still be a project this year, perhaps some of the sidewalk around 21st Street in the middle school. And then going forward, we haven't necessarily earmarked funding, but maybe it's a match for some of the Martin Creek Trail, or maybe it's additional sidewalk. We'll have to talk about that as it comes together. It doesn't look like there's a big request this year in snow and ice. So Al said that means we're not going to need to plow or sand very much. So we'll see if Adam and Corey were right about that. Any questions on engineering or streets or snow and ice that you want to talk about? Okay. Let's talk about City Hall and traffic control. You can see in City Hall, we're still working on data and wiring. This may be a CARES Act opportunity for us in the sense that we are going to need to upgrade technology. We have upgraded some technology. We could do more. We have an old building. Maybe some reconstruction will be in order for CARES Act funding, but we'll just have to see what that looks like. I know the finance department would like to make some changes. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what's available and what makes sense in our building as well. Traffic control, we don't have anything exciting there. I did want to point out in the out year that for our future Commissioner Maibaum, for his benefit, we haven't forgotten about the traffic signals. We have them in an out year. The commission can change that. However, it's one of those things that we're able to keep operating, maybe not the smartest way, but this year is not a year that we felt like we should fix something that's still working. So we didn't forget about that. Questions on those? If not, we will go to the airport. As you know, we have a lot of projects being constructed this year, not a lot the following year. We do have on our horizon the purchase of a loader and a fuel truck at the airport, so we'll have to be talking about those. We have design work on the North Taxiway going on for completion in the future as well. So we believe that construction will be 2022. So that's coming up in advance as well. So we have design first and then the construction. So lots of improvements at the airport. That isn't something we talk about a lot, but Commissioner Hoffner can probably attest to for our little airport, that's a lot of projects. We have a lot to be proud of there, and that's a big progress forward at that facility. Airport, senior center, and library, I will just, not going to group those together, but in this sense I will. It's going to be tight for us this year. It's going to be tighter for the county. So our discussions for revenue sharing on those facilities are going to be opportunities to grow our relationship. And so as we move forward in July and talk with our friends at the County Commission, it's going to be important to talk about those services that could reflect what we are able to do or aren't able to do in all those facilities. There isn't a lot of capital planned at the senior center. However, we did have to replace something that we hadn't anticipated, the rooftop unit in the main hall assembly. So that will make the picture look a little different for our request with the county. Also, you can see we continue to move the parking lot forward. That's something that's coming down the pipe that's going to need to be addressed in the future. So the parking lot there right now is holding up, but eventually we know we'll have to replace that as well. Library looks like a fairly regular capital stream for next year. You know, there might be some CARES Act funding that is applicable to libraries, since those are facilities that are have been challenged to reopen based on what happens at libraries. So if there's some CARES Act funding there, we may be revisiting the capital improvement plan. We ready to go on to parks? Okay, you're making my job easy. This is awkward without sitting. This is more difficult without sitting around a table, seeing all your guys' body language. But Parks and Recreation, we always have, as you know, a lot more to do than we can do. We need to make some mower purchases in the parks. That's usually the case. They're hard on those because they use them so frequently. The playground equipment in 2021 is slated to be Westbrook Park, or whatever we end up calling that park. The playground in the Westbrook development. They don't have anything there now, so it would be nice to have something definitely there. In Sertoma Park, Todd would like to replace some of the roofing on shelters. Those are needed to be done. Another priority that we've been pushing for a number of years are the lights on the old, what people call the old football field. I call it the junior football field, if folks know what we're talking about there. We're certainly not able to do all of our capital or even much of the capital we want to do in parks. So we're just kind of keeping priorities as they come up and as they've been pushed. So those are kind of the next steps. There's a purchase of a new truck. One of the pickup trucks needs a new engine, so it's just beyond its life. It needs to be taken care of. West Side Park improvements have been pushed. The Mead Building isn't quite ready to accept, or the Territory Museum isn't ready to be able to move their buildings yet, so that pushes off our ability to do some changes in West Side Park. And we can't probably put together a big enough plan right now to do that either. Some states have used some funding towards outdoor spaces because, you know, the indoors is really where transmissibility for the COVID is high. If we're able to do that, I know Todd will be aggressive in looking for every opportunity, and that'd be great because our parks could sure use them, but we just don't have a lot of capital each year that we can spend in the Parks Department. Occasionally the parks is an area where you guys have a suggestion and you want to change something or say, well, why are you doing this instead of this, or this shelter really needs something. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to bring forward something if you had an idea or had heard something from constituents.
Hey, this is Faulkner. In regards to the amphitheater in the Riverside Park, it seems like we got a lot of concerned citizens about, you know, looking at possibility of a, you know, maybe a vinyl or something top, and then also more accessible. I know that's been brought up before, but I don't see it at all till way out in possibility. I'm wondering if that could be at least 2022, if it would be possible.
Yes, anything can be moved around. My understanding was there was a group that was active in beginning to do some fundraising, and I think Commissioner Minor, you maybe were in contact with them. Have you heard how they're doing in terms of fundraising?
There's no money currently being raised due to COVID and nothing happening in the amphitheater. So it would maybe be something we could look at for next summer.
Yeah, we can certainly move that up. It's come up every year since I've been here. And we can certainly have that discussion. I think it makes sense to do a public-private partnership. And so, you know, that's something maybe we can keep in an out year, but move it up closer than this year. You know, to do something, you know, in this year, I'm not really sure what our space should look like going forward, but we should have more information as we get further along. Maybe now, given what we know about separating and social distancing, that should be more of a remodel than is currently talked about.
It's always easier to push than pull, right?
Always. Huther Family Aquatic Center, I don't think we have a lot to talk about there other than to let you guys know that we are aware we're going to have another change order. Probably not a lot of major significant change order, but we're going to have one. We don't know what the final outcome is on that pool construction, so we won't know that probably until this time next year, or maybe even a little later. So construction is going well. However, they're moving along. They've had some nice, dry, warm days for work. So if anybody have any specific questions about the construction costs?
Hoffner again. Am I stepping on someone? I think, my last budget meeting, so I got to make one more push to, I just think we really need to be careful, again, as I indicated in past meetings, about we don't get, away from what the exactly, or I shouldn't say exactly, but, what the people voted for. We don't want to add anything that wasn't listed specifically in our request for the taxpayers. I think it's important here to be accountable, not that because we came in so much under budget, that I just feel like to urge the new commission to look carefully at this and make each decision based upon, there's some decisions we can make, making a better foundation for fewer costs in regards to maintenance. I could see that. But if it's an add-on, that's something that wasn't spelled out, I just be careful. I just would urge you folks to look at.
Okay. Well, Martin Creek is next, and you see in both 2021 and 2022, we have $9 million slated. Those numbers are likely to change. Again, I would anticipate our next first big construction project would be, first big construction project there probably won't occur until 2022. Engineering right now is working on an RFQ with FEMA to get proposals for engineering services. So we have to go through that process of choosing an engineering service, and then designing the projects, bidding them out. So it could be a while yet, and then we have to apply for the funding before we can even go out for bid. So there's going to be a long process there. We'll talk about the EDA money in a little while, but those of you who've been on the commission a long time know that the EDA federal funding that we received for 2011, the 2011 flooding, we just closed out some of those projects last year. So when I talk about a long-term discussion, that's what Martin Creek is going to be. So I know we're all anxious there, but there'll be a lot of talk about that, and it might even be later before we have projects put together. But we'll know more once we have our engineering firm secured, which will probably be, I would say, towards the end of the year. Questions on the creek? Okay, then we'll talk a little bit about our bridge and street fund. Cedar Street, when we started talking about Cedar Street, we were talking about a repair. Now we're talking about a replacement. So we do have some funds already in Highway Infrastructure Program. That's the $103,000 you see on the left-hand side of the sheet there. We've applied for two different funding opportunities, the BIG program, which is a state program, and then the Bridge Replacement Program, which is a federal program. We'd like either, but we'd rather have the federal program. The state program, we have to buy a lot of the project, as we did with Pine Street, in order to get the funds, to get enough points to get the funds. So we're hoping that we can get some federal funding for that project, and we'd be looking at then planning a replacement planning a replacement project for that bridge then in the out years. So we'll keep our fingers crossed there on revenue. There is an inspection next year slated for underwater, the DOT doing their underwater bridge inspections, and they'll include Meridian Bridge on that. One of those big parking lot items that we should talk about sometime in a work session is the Meridian Bridge and the deck inspection. We talked about doing that in 25 or 26. So we were able to plan 5 to 10 years out in advance of having to address anything on the Meridian Bridge. In a future work session, we should talk about, is that the right time to do the inspection, or do we wait a little longer? I think what I know right now, any big project on the Meridian Bridge is out of our reach with current revenue. We're not even talking about doing an inspection quite yet, so that could change. So to me, that's something that we should probably talk about in a future work session. And I'm not really sure that it should be in our bridge and street fund, in the sense that we won't get federal bridge repair money for that project. It would be a parks, recreation, or a triple-B type funded project. So it wouldn't fall into infrastructure or even second penny likely. So just wanted to bring that forward as something that's still out there that we still need to talk about.
Hey, Amy, this is Mayor Johnson. With the deterioration we saw in some of the columns in this past year, is there any indication at this point whether that's something we really need to worry about? Is that just, is it not a big deal?
Engineering's working right now with a firm to put to, I think, gosh, I don't know if it's Banner, maybe Adam, you want to jump in, with someone to put together a cost estimate for those repairs. And I think we should know that soon.
Yeah, so if you're referring to the concrete on the pillars on the Nebraska side, that's not it's not a structural defect, it's more of a cosmetic defect at this point. And we do have Banner Engineering on contract to put together a repair specification / project for that to hopefully get that taken care of this year.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Dwayne, as he mentioned earlier, has worked really hard with a lot of different partners on completing the upgrades to Dispatch Center and to the radio project. So there isn't much planned here in the out years. We're in really good shape. And I just wanted to throw a little, kudos out to Dwayne, who's done more to upgrade our dispatch and our PSAP center in the last few years than it's been done in a long, long time. And so we are hoping that some of that CARES Act funding, maybe the governor will throw to PSAPs throughout the state. We could certainly always use more and always needing to upgrade equipment, et cetera. But we're in, I think, very good shape, better shape than we've been in a long time at our dispatch center. Our water utility, there isn't a lot of capital here to talk about, I guess, at least in terms of the size of that department. But I did want to talk about the item that's a little bit higher in cost, the one that's $150,000, the Slacker Lime. That is the piece of equipment I learned that turns our lime into usable material, and that's for the 72 plant. We're not using the 72 plant much. We're using mostly our new plant. So Kyle is working with Sage and the others to determine, is that really going to be something that we're necessarily going to replace, or should we continue to work with it as we are and try to keep it going? They want to have some more time pass before they decide that, make that determination. So that may or may not be an expense that occurs. Kyle, is that fair?
Yeah, we just need a little more time to see where we're at with it and what some of our options are, and how much we're going to be running that 1972 facility.
When it comes to our street projects, those should match up with our, you should see in the 506 with what's being outlined here in water utility. We have a project scheduled for West Street, Broadway, 31st Street, the Wilson trailer, Spruce Street, and then we do have Jacqueline Circle. That isn't necessarily a street project, but that's a water main that has needed to be tackled for a number of years. I needed a drink of water before I got into this whole EDA funding and our wastewater. So our EDA funding kind of crosses over between water and wastewater. One of the foundational things that we need to understand is our distribution system and where may we be having infiltration from groundwater, from other sources into our distribution system. In my discussions with Kyle, we've determined that we need to talk about, how are we going to address infiltration? Do we address it in the system, in the distribution system, or do we address it at the plant? That's one of the big decisions that we're going to need to make when we talk about improvements to wastewater. So that's kind of one of the cornerstones of that decision. And to do that, we need to address and do some modeling both in water and wastewater. So those are reflected there in that, I believe it's a light blue kind of aqua color there. And it is EDA funding in 2021. So in the actual wastewater utility, there's not a lot there until you get into that EDA funding. So again, we have modeling to talk about there. We also have some major expenses, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here. We can talk about any of the items, but I do want to talk about a few of them specifically. So one of the items you see there is $1.5 million approximately for electrical. Well, right now we're on one electrical feed, so you can see the issue in that with all those different systems we have. If that electrical feed is disrupted, there's a problem. So part of this upgrade is looping the system and putting the different facilities, the different points of treatment on different electrical feeds. We have, the main electrical gear, that's taking all those electrical feeds and separating them as well. And then the generator is something that's been in our capital improvement plan for a number of years, but it's something that we can't apply to EDA because it makes us more redundant. So if we should have one of those systems go down, we can still be able to run the plant, or we can move that generator to other places as well. All of these things, and we can talk about them independently if you'd like, make a difference in terms of keeping the plant going and then investing in it. So we know we need to do some immediate repair. And these projects will repair the things that need to be taken care of initially. How much we want to invest in this current facility is going to be the question. Probably not for this commission necessarily, but for definitely a future commission. So if you see a number of years on your horizon, know that you may be talking about this, will likely be talking about this going forward. We do have to invest some money in our plant. How much do you want to invest? Once we understand whether we have what we have for infiltration, we can determine whether or not we want to invest in treatment or in distribution. That will make a difference in terms of how much we invest in this plant, or if we invest more in the distribution, and if you want to invest in that physical location. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and there's going to be a lot of considerations to make. One of those is rates. So just these improvements here are going to impact rates. It would be nice if, especially right now, I could tell you that, well, with COVID-19, we just don't feel like we can raise rates. We're going to have to. We have a match here, and we have enough increase in expenses that we're just going to have to continue to address rates and adjust them annually for some time. So I do want to leave some time for Kyle here to talk a little bit about this. And then if you want to hear more specifics about, well, what's the sewer main for 889,000, or if you want to know specifics about those, we could talk about those as well. Kyle, do you want to give a little more information, or do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think you hit on most of it. Really what it is we've got some issues at the plant, some equipment failures, and some things we know we need to address now. You don't have to have a PhD in engineering to understand some of these things need to be replaced. But we've just got a lot of things in the future that we know we need to look at. And that's where the wastewater treatment condition assessment, the wastewater master plan, the system, collection system, distribution system, master planning will give us that information as we move forward to really look at how we want to address these issues long term. So the smaller projects you see there, which are still fairly substantial, are really hitting on some things we know we have issues right now. The planning documents will get us more information and kind of give us some direction where we want to go in the future.
The way I've kind of looked at this, I have to simplify it because I don't understand all the processes and I don't understand all the intricacies of wastewater treatment. Getting better, but I've looked at it like a major house upgrade. Are you going to remodel your bathrooms and kitchens and put on a new third stall garage at a pretty high cost? Or do you say, you know what, let's build a new house? There's a lot of things that need to be done. There's a lot of things that we would do if we were making, doing a new project. But there's some immediate things you have to do in order to, to operate. And we've got a combination of an aged plant, circa 1960s, that we've done through a couple upgrades. But I'm just really want to be aggressive, and I think if I'm reading the commission right over the last couple of years, we don't want to be in the same situation we got into with our water plant, where we're so far behind that we're really facing serious situations. I'd like to invest enough that we can operate comfortably for enough time to give the commission, whomever the commission is at the time, good information to determine whether or not they want to upgrade at a current facility, rebuild the facility in the same location, or maybe build the facility off location. Regardless of that choice that commission makes, it'll make the water plant project probably look small. And I'm not saying that to scare people, but just to understand the magnitude of that project and the need of that project. wastewater runs all the time, and there's a lot more systems in it to get that back, run that through. So questions, comments, ideas?
This is Commissioner Mosier, and I guess a question for you or Kyle. Quickly adding that up, as folks will see on the screen or as they look out on paper, you're talking $21.1 million in essence over the next 5 years. At what point, or what does that, I guess my question is, how much time does that $21 million buy us before we get the $100 and some million question?
That's a really good question. The first phase of this EDA project, so one of the things I probably should have mentioned too is, as we worked with EDA here over the last couple of weeks, one of the things they've said is, before we can get any reimbursements of that roughly 6.5 million that we received, is we have to have all these projects under the contract. So one of the things we're working on right now is how we're going to scope and package these projects for EDA together to get them all under contract as soon as we can. So some of that money that's all listed in 2021 will lead into further years. That's probably a 2-3 year project, not a 1 or 2 year. As we get into that master planning, that's really where we'll see what are those options for. You know, these projects we're looking at EPA is a stopgap. It's going to add 10 years of life to some of these facilities and some of this equipment at the facility. But that's what that master planning will kind of give us the idea of, is how much money do we have to put in it now to get 10 more years? How much money will it cost to do more of a complete overhaul and get a 25-year project? So that's kind of what we'll get out of that master plan. So what you see in the light blue is what we'll do now. Again, we should get 5 to 10 years additional life out of a lot of this equipment because we do that. Then the master plan will give us a little more direction on what the long-term cost benefits will be, whether it's remodeling, equipment upgrades, or how far we go with those equipment upgrades. Hopefully that answers your question, because it doesn't give you a real good answer.
No, it does. That was just my curiosity on how long or the extended life that this buys us.
And I think some of what you guys will be helping to decide in the next couple of years is what our community's philosophy is on infiltration. That will help shape future commissioners' decisions. Kyle, is that fair? I think in us understanding how we want to approach infiltration will make a big difference into what kind of project and how the magnitude of the project.
Yeah, a little bit more on the infiltration. It's been done several different ways. Infiltration is when you're getting excess groundwater runoff into your wastewater system. I know the city of Brookings recently did a large wastewater plant project in the city of Brookings, and they really opted to address infiltration just by building a large enough wastewater treatment facility to treat that infiltration. City of Aberdeen has kind of gone the opposite direction. They're really concentrating out in the system to prevent infiltration and not have to treat that excess water that's coming into the system. So really it's getting that modeling done, looking at our system, understanding where infiltration is coming from, and is it small enough points of area where we can address it in the collection system, or is it such a large area in the collection system that really can't be addressed, and we need to address it at the treatment facility. So right now we're kind of into that window where we really need to get good data collected so we can make the best decisions and move forward with how we spend our money.
Other questions there?
Yeah, Hoffner here. I know we talked about this last year. I just want to thank Amy and the staff for getting your ducks in a row, so to speak, because as we've learned from many projects that are federally or hoping for federal funding, we learned from the past, especially the airport, that if you have everything laid out correctly and ready to go, we're more apt and organized as we have been in the past. I think it's so important to thank you for getting ready, because I know that if we're ready to go and there's money available for certain types of these projects, we'll be in the front seat. So thank you for that. And I know it works, and I realize how important the master plans are. And thanks.
Well, wastewater has done a great job with that. Also, we could not do what we do without District 3, John Clem and Greg Henderson. And, you know, we've been working with HDR as well. Really been working on our behalf to make sure we access any funding opportunity that's available. And so District 3 especially has been helpful. So we're really fortunate to have them in our community. If we've had enough wastewater talk for a while, of course, Kyle's going to spend some money on some, you know, equipment as well. You'll see that as well. It's funny how in some departments we talk about 10 or 15,000, and in Kyle's department we don't mention it unless it, you know, goes past 250 or 300. But that's why we call him the $1 Million Man. Cemetery is I believe what we have. Yes. Cemetery is what we have next. Not a lot to talk about there, other than some replacement of some equipment. Solid waste collection, we have replacing the tippers coming up. That's important for us as well. Joint powers, we need to sit down and visit with the staff. I'll be reaching out to John Prescott and Vermillion. We need to buy some equipment next year and the following year. And we need to talk about sharing some of the revenue in a little different way, or i.e. Considering how they're handling their recycling program. I think that topic's going to have to come up. So as you're deciding who will be on joint powers from the commission as a liaison, I think it's important to make sure that we have that discussion. You know, this equipment that we need to buy, transfer trailers and upgrades to our rubble trench, you know, we have to do those things. It's not optional. So we're going to need to have the revenue to do that. We're going to need to talk with them about that. So we'll start with the staff and then hopefully have a proposal for the rest of the Joint Powers Board. But that will bleed into that discussion of how recycling is handled. Because as those of you who have close knowledge of joint powers know, you know, it's really a financial hurt on the whole operation, the way they're continuing with their recycling. We also have a chain link fence plugged in for a improvement. We've had a lot of complaints about garbage, you know, blowing off our site, so we'd like to kind of contain that a little more if we can. Okay, Fox Run, every year gets a little bit brighter and sunnier at Fox Run. In 2021, we have $100,000 of capital that we're sharing in the cost of with Great Life, but next year it will be a 50-50 split. So we'll have a $50,000 expense, as will they. So that'll be, I believe, our third year already in the contract. So that's hard to believe, but things are going well there. You can see what they have outlined. Todd sits down with them and talks with them about, you know, what their priorities are for the golf course and what they'd like to purchase. And, you know, we hold them to the amount that we talked about, but we let them run their operation. So things there seem to be going pretty well. Moving on to the SAC, and the items we share there with the school, you can see some of the things that are slated for upcoming years. The UV system in the pool, we really need to address the doors and the frames going into the pool. That's been on for a number of years on our CIP. We always purchase a little fitness equipment, and then we have some other smaller costs. Carpeting is on that list as well. That's an expense, a big expense that we share. I'd like for you all to think a little bit about the SAC as one of those maybe parking lot items, or something that you want to start kicking around in your back of your head. You know, it was built when we didn't have facilities for fitness in the community, as many as we do now. It was probably built, might be talking out of school a little bit, but too small at when it was built. It was probably a little small for what the community needed. The weight and cardio room has always been small, but it's even smaller now given COVID-19. And will that facility still serve us now if our new normal is different, if it doesn't go back to how we used to operate? What does that facility look like for us in terms of revenue generation? I know the school needs more room for training. Sports now for young people are all year round. They're training for their sports no matter the season. I know they could use that facility. A lot of group fitness, recreational and intramural sports are done privately. What does the future of the city's role look like in that? What's our priorities in the community? What are family priorities? Will this change sort of how families look at socialization and recreation? Has it been, I don't know, a relief for some families not to run to something every single night or have their kid in so many programs? I don't know the answer to that. We rethought the way we did business at Fox Run, and that's worked out really well. Should we be rethinking how we conduct our business at the Summit Activity Center? It's just something to throw out there as a parking lot item. Are there resources that we're using that could be, focused on other community priorities or organizations that would help grow the BBB or grow our sales tax picture a little bit more? Something to talk about, something to think about if you're interested as a sort of parking lot item in the future. We want to make sure that we're sticking with our values and our priorities. And I think one thing that this year has taught all of us is that we're not going to be able to afford to do everything well. So what is it we want to do as a community? And that conversation is bigger than us. That's a conversation to talk about in our whole community. So just something I wanted to bring forward to have you start kicking around.
Hey, Amy, some of those questions, would the city school committee be an appropriate venue to start discussing some of those things, or does that need to happen in a different venue?
Yeah, I think the city school should talk about it. I think the school would like to have, more space to do their training and that type of thing, but we're in an agreement with them, But I'd even like to think a little bit bigger than that and say, what are we trying to do as a community? And what do we provide as a community, and where do maybe some other partnerships exist that could be expanded and extended? How do we want to approach promotion of our community? And do we have some resources that could assist in that? We have a lot more facilities. They're not necessarily city-owned facilities, but a lot more facilities to work with now as a community. So, should we be turning our attention to attracting more people in, or do we want to expand existing facilities? What is our philosophy going to be? This building is getting to an age. I think it was built in. Was it built in 1995? If anybody knows, they can chime in. Or circa 1995. Um, that was longer ago than I want it to be for a lot of reasons. But I mean, that it's time, you know, to start talking about that. We spent a lot of money on indoor aquatics last year with the HVAC. You know, we're spending a lot of money on aquatics this year outside. Maybe aquatics is a focus area and other things aren't. So, you know, I just want to bring that forward to start thinking about in everything we do. We shouldn't think about staying the same. We should think about how can we do it better, how can we do it smarter, or how can we do it in a way that really reflects who we are as a community or who we want to be. Not just keep doing things because that's how we do them. That's not how this commission, at least in the last 5 years, has rolled. So I'm hoping that, you know, these conversations spark that discussion, and not just among you, but in the community. And I'm not saying, you know, we flip it on its head this budget year, but I think, you know, this is a time of change when we can start talking about that. The limited access has gone well. I think our memberships will suffer because it's not available all the time and open. So we'll have to see what the ramifications are of that, but that should have revenue ramifications as well. I don't know if we'll get to a point this year where we're ready for open swim or not. That could make a big impact as well. What does that mean for the future? So lots of unknowns there too, but just things that we've been talking about as a staff and had conversations about too, a little bit as well. You know, that we have some other facilities that we might be able to work with and partner with. And I haven't talked with any of those folks, but just things to bring forward. If there aren't any other comments or things to talk about there, I'd like to talk about the 506. The blue shaded area is, you know, kind of the annual dollars slated for annual repairs. And then we have a number of street projects that we're looking at. 23rd Street west of West City Limits Road, that's the TID number 8. We have a clock there, a time clock to get those improvements done, as you know. Spruce Street 4th through 6th. 30th Street, West City Limits Road to Atkins. Whiting Drive, Burley to Fertig. That's a concrete street. That's the one that's 550, I believe. That's getting in pretty tough shape as well. So that's something that needs to be addressed and talked about. 15th Street is still in an out year. You know, if a future housing project comes together near around that neighborhood, that might be something we need to talk about as well. But those are the street projects we have planned thus far. And as you all know, we still have a lot of them on the horizon. But those are what we have planned right now for 2021. You guys are so easy. I'm ready to talk Central Garage if you guys are ready to talk Central Garage. We have a rehab of the doors and interiors, a scissors lift, which is really a piece of safety equipment that I think is long overdue that we need to have at Central Garage, and then some pavement replacement as well. Just a maintenance issue. Certainly, not everything in the capital improvement plan will stay. Some will get pushed. But what we'd like to hear from you is whether we're on the right track or not. And while you're discussing that with me, I'm going to bring up our next item. So feel free to ask questions or let us know, are we headed in the right path or are we way off the trail?
I would just say I appreciate the work that you and the department heads put into this document. There's so many things we don't know, more so than we usually don't know at this time, and you've put together a very conservative plan based on those uncertainties, and I think we are on the right track.
This is Commissioner Sarda. I agree with Nathan. We're going the right direction. A lot of challenges definitely in front of us. But Amy, you did mention that since we're all not in the same room, it's kind of hard to tell what our expressions are. But it's kind of hard to chime in. But hopefully everyone's nodding their head, yes, no type of thing. So appreciate everything you have in front of us. It's pretty clear to me.
Hoffner here. I echo those comments. I think I said last year that out of all the 9 years I've been on the commission, last year was the most uncertain budget. I think you've topped that this year. But there's so many challenges, obviously, that you folks will face watching from the sidelines. But hey, listen, got a good start. I think we got a good document to start with, and I know that you're flexible enough to make changes when needed and sometimes moments notice, but appreciate everything the staff has done again to present this, and I realize there's many moving targets, but thank you. Oh, one more comment. Just a little thing, but maybe it's just not even worth, but sometimes when you discuss replacing a piece of equipment, like for instance, not to pick on Todd or anybody, but like replacing or not replacing, but buying Kubota mower. I mean, not that Kubota mower is not good, but maybe it just should be mower. I don't know if that's nitpicking on it, but I just think that it seems like you missed the brand name, and maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean we'll replace it with a Kubota, but if they're over the certain amount, we have to go out for bid. As of right now, anyhow, but it's probably more of a nature of that's the name of the one we are replacing. But yeah, certainly, I think it would be wrong to say that there are probably pieces of equipment that we find work better for our operation, but the brand names do change. What we do is we try to buy locally when we can and get the best, deal for the city. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Triple B, and I'd like to make this a little bit smaller, but I'm not having any luck doing that, so I'm going to share it with you. I hope you're looking at it as well. I'd like to start a little bit with the middle of the sheet. So in the middle of the sheet, you can see a line that's multi-shaded, and it starts out with percent of 2019. Right here, I'm moving my cursor around it if you can see my cursor. So in 2020, we are very conservatively estimating that we'll end up with 50% of the revenue in Triple B that we had previously. That's bad news for us. I hope that's wrong. You guys know that our last Triple B was down 26%. I hope that's as bad as it gets. I don't know. I don't know if people are going to continue to be conservative. I don't know how much the events that have been canceled are going to impact us. I do talk regularly with Casey Haberman, She's given me a lot of great hope about what's happening at our campgrounds. I've talked with a lot of local retailers, depending upon what they're doing or selling. I've heard a lot of great things from Menards, from Ace Hardware, from Mead Lumber, from those types of businesses, but I've heard some restaurants that are having a hard time. So if somebody knows the magic number, tell it to me. But I would like to shoot low and be wrong. So going forward then in 2021, kind of starts a little bit of what I project to be a recovery. So there I'm saying I think we're going to get 30, we're going to have 70% of the revenue that we had back in 2019. 2022, 80%, et cetera, et cetera. So I could be wrong. I may be adjusting. I likely will be adjusting, but that's what I'm going forward with now. So we talked earlier at a work session about kind of what we wanted to do this year, 2020. And it felt to me, and I know we'll have a couple new commissioners coming on, but it felt to me like the direction you wanted to take is, look, we made commitments to people this year, we should keep them. That's how I feel. I don't think it's right at this point, since we have a balance, to go to one of our outside agencies and say, well, we know we passed that we were going to give you $30,000, but now we're only, since COVID-19, we're not going to give you the rest, or we'd like some of that back. That's, to me, not the right thing to do. So, so what I've done this year is kept everything the same for 2020. So scrolling down, you can see the balance there, where we think that will leave you. Here's the number, the 2,000 or 211,000. Oh, Dwayne just showed me a trick here. Look at that. What would we do without Dwayne, everybody? I would be confused and not very good at this. Okay, so I've left everything the same for 2020. 2021, I don't expect you to tell me exactly what you want done tonight, but I want to just visit with you about it a little bit. I've taken out things that are city expenses, things that we do in the city, where I can, to minimize the impact on cuts that you may want to make or you may need to make to outside agencies. And I've done that because I don't think any of you have a desire to cut any outside agencies, unless we have to. So you can see there that I cut out things like fireworks. See that? I've cut out things like, cut down things like our special events. That would be things like music at the Meridian and some of the other things we do. I've cut down our special events overtime. So, that doesn't mean we're not going to have fireworks. I did have a private individual contact me and say they would like to raise money for fireworks. Would we, maybe do the bathrooms, and maybe, but, I don't know that. That would have to maybe be a decision later because I've taken that out. And then it's the overtime of having our people working those events. I don't know the answer to that. I will say that Yankton Area Progressive Growth asked for less than $230,000. I've left that amount in, however. It's my understanding Convention and Visitors Bureau and Yankton Area Progressive Growth are two entities that give us the ability, as they're doing their jobs, to expand that triple B further. So I hate to step backwards on those, but that's your guys' call. Wanted to hear your thoughts and comments. The other thing I'll mention is this transfer to general fund outside agencies. I can show you next when we're a little further past talking about triple B, I can show you that we do have a number of outside agencies that are funded from the general fund. You know them. They're like Transit, Lewis and Clark Behavioral Health, those types of things, great agencies. If we're needing to cut our general fund, I hate to cut those folks. So my suggestion would be that you take some money from discretionary or promotional money to help fund, to make those whole and at least not cut them, rather than cut our departments who are going to scramble in their operating budgets as it is if cuts have to be made. BBB is probably not an area we're going to have CARES funding. I don't think the state or federal government will give us funds for, fireworks shows or CVB. There might be some grant programs they can apply for, but I just don't think that's possible. So if we kept things that way in 2021, let me go down here, say we have 70% of the revenue that we think we're going to be. You see where that leaves your balance at the end of 2021. I could be wrong. We could spring back totally and be fine by then, but I'm just being conservative. And then you see where we go in the out years, because we were spending more than we were taking in already, and so I've cut some things, but couple questions too. I did not add in any money to market the Huther Family Aquatic Center. Casey Haberman said, her recommendation is we should be marketing that this year, this fall, for purchasing passes for Christmas gifts and things like that. So my suggestion would be to do 5,000 in this year's Triple B and 5,000 in next year's Triple B, or to ask her to earmark 5,000 of her each year's budget to help market that for us and get that off the ground. But I didn't put that in there because I felt like that was a discussion maybe you guys would want to have. Also, the Downtown Historic District Preservation Fund, that's in the budget this year. It's not in the budget next year. You might want to flip-flop that. I don't think the project that we were getting close to award will probably happen. We have never announced who that is. We could go back and talk with them and say, are you planning on doing that? Would you do it next year? Could you do it this year and make that determination based on that? But going forward, I've taken that out because I just don't see us being able to afford to do that without cutting other places. So we don't have anything for decorations or anything like that. Nothing transferred to park capital, which we've done at the past. Nothing towards paying off the loan to ourselves on our land north of town. Nothing of that nature. Just kind of being conservative. So tell me what you want. Besides more money in the BBB.
And that's what I was just going to say. When it comes, this is Bridget Benson. When it comes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, I definitely want to stay strong there, funding them what they're requesting. Just because not only do I think that brings that money back to the BBB, but I also think that brings money into our sales tax. Like we said, the campground's going strong. I think that's a lot of the reason of why we're seeing Menards so busy. I've heard so many times of people building decks and building outdoor structures due to their camping, their permanent camp spots. So by continuing to support the Convention and Visitors Bureau, I think we're helping our sales tax, not only the Triple B.
This also means, too, and I mean, everyone's figuring this out, right? But, by not cutting and not having a balance, when people come and make requests for new things, you know what your answer's got to be. And that's hard because we don't know what good things are going to come forward, right? I mean, I do know, you know, Crystal Nelson has visited with me about the fact that they need to move those buildings off of West Side Park and onto, what are we calling it, the Mead campus, and, you know, wondering if we would have the money. And I just said, no, we wouldn't, probably, but not a good time to ask. This was right when things were gearing up. So when things like that come forward, if we're not going to cut, we may just need to say, you know, thanks for asking, and we need to shelf it. It can't be right now. And, you know, new events, new programs, things of that nature, we'll have to say no.
This is Commissioner Schramm. I'd like to agree with Bridget that, you know, in a downtime, it's not a time for, in my mind, a time for us to retreat, but rather be as proactive as we can to help support our businesses that are here. So if we can use BBB funds to promote BBB and promote coming into town to spend money, I think that is only going to help us recover faster. So to me, if anything, we can't cut our funding to promote coming to Yankton from outside areas.
I highlighted the bottom line here with ending balance. If I'm wrong and we have more revenue, we could end up with a higher balance in 2021, of course. But if we have less, we might need to hold off in the end of the year. And then definitely that makes our conversation for 2022 even more difficult. But I mean, let's hope that I'm very, very wrong. I have talked with other city managers. We're fortunate actually to have the mix that we have. We're not as reliant on pure tourism, say as some West River communities, you know, like Sturgis, for example. They're really struggling. A lot will depend upon what they decide tonight and what happens with their event. Spearfish, those communities have a lot more reliance on tourism. We're fortunate that a lot of our BBB not only is a mix of tourism, but also what people do here in town, the people in town do here. And those things will continue. But I don't know how our smaller restaurants are doing, if they'll continue to do well, if they'll change their business plan. How comfortable will people be going to restaurants this summer and this fall and then this winter when flu season hits? Has that changed for you personally? If it has, it's probably changed in our community. Or will drive in and carry out and that kind of thing pick up enough that it'll save that. One thing that has been awesome, I think, is people aren't leaving Yankton as much. So, you know, unfortunately it took a pandemic to get the message across about shopping local, but that has been beneficial. And so maybe as people get more comfortable, maybe they'll be comfortable staying in Yankton, but not going further out. So.
Commissioner Minor here. With so much uncertainty, I can't imagine how much sleep you've lost over putting this part of the document together. At this point, I feel like you have anticipated. I like the idea of anticipating low, and I feel like you've cut reasonable costs across the facade grant, fireworks, things that we could partner with someone else, for example, with the fireworks. I would be hesitant to make too many decisions at this point, given how much we don't know. So this princess chooses not to slay the dragon yet.
Yeah, I think, that, we had no really idea where to put what we anticipate for revenue. I mean, 30% would be based on we said we think we're going to be 30% down. Based on what we know today, that would be true. But overall, when you look through the span of the year, I'm not sure. So we can always spend more, and you can always allocate more. But you can't do less. You know, if you don't have it. So I just wanted to be realistic. And, you know, not a lot of, some folks didn't ask for an increase. And, you know, I think people understand where we're at, but I think it'll be important for you all to discuss amongst yourself when requests come, because they will. Other agencies are hurting too, I'm sure. If we're hurting, I think people's ability to donate to different things in our community will be hurting. Might have to hold off and see where we're at the end of the year before you make decisions.
Is there any more discussion about this portion of the budget?
If not, I'm going to make some judgment calls on some of the questions I asked you, and then when we present this to you in August, you can tell me I'm wrong or not, and then the new nine can determine what direction they want to go.
All right. Since we've gotten through the entire document, I don't anticipate we need to meet tomorrow night unless people really want to just sit down and chat about stuff. If you feel differently, speak up now. Okay. So if there's nothing else, no more questions, no more discussion, I would ask for a motion to adjourn this evening.
I'll move to adjourn. Benson.
Sorry, a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Just once again, Amy, department heads, thank you for walking us through this and for all the sleep I know you've lost trying to get this right when you know that there's just so many things that could change, and even the next month versus the next 6 months.
Well, I appreciate all the department heads with the scheduling, particularly this year. Also, being open to meeting in different ways. It's a little bit harder when we're not all together. And of course, Dwayne and Al, they've done the lion's share here, and so really appreciate what they've done to put this together. And we'll know more. So when we know more, we'll do better. And so when we get closer to August with our outside agencies, with our operating, we'll have more of a clear picture.
Okay. Al, roll call, please. Al, are you on mute?
I'm on mute. Can't you guys hear when I yell like that? Okay, we'll start roll call to adjourn the meeting. We'll start with Benson.
Benson, aye.
Benson is aye. Sarda.
Sarda, aye.
Sarda is aye. And I don't believe Fertig's here, but I will call the name twice just to be sure. Fertig? Commissioner Fertig? Hoffner?
Aye.
Hoffner is aye. Minor?
Minor, aye.
Minor is aye. Mosier?
Mosier, aye.
Mosier is aye. Schramm?
Schramm, aye.
Schramm is aye. Weber?
Weber is aye.
Weber is aye. Mayor Johnson?
Johnson, aye.
Johnson is aye. Motion to adjourn passes 8-0.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Hey.